Can you identify this photograph?
Yes, this is a close-up of the steering wheel.
And can you describe what you see on the steering wheel?
It looks like there's dirt on the steering wheel.
Dirt on the steering wheel. Thank you. That is Exhibit 205. Can you identify this photograph?
Yes, this appears to be in the back seat of the passenger, the back side of the passenger seat.
Thank you. And I'll move that as Exhibit 206. And Ms. Littlejohn, you may or may not be familiar with this photograph. Can you identify that?
I do not believe I can. This is not a photograph that I took.
And can you identify this photograph?
Yes, this is just an overall photo of the back of the trunk.
All right. I will move this photograph as the next exhibit. And once the contents are removed from the trunk, did you do the photographing of those items?
I did not.
I will pass the witness.
Well, examine.
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, ma'am. You may sit down. Are we releasing Ms. Littlejohn from her, you may return to your assignment. Thank you.
Thank you.
You may call your next witness.
Christina Wells.
Step right up and raise your right hand and face her forward.
Do you solemnly swear from testimony you give in this case be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Thank you.
Would you state your name for the jury, please,
Hold
ma'am?
that microphone to you just a little bit, please. Thank you.
It's Christina Proctor,
And how do you spell that?
CHRISTINA
All right. And Agent Proctor, where do you work?
I work at the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation.
All right. And I guess I should clear this up. Were you formerly Christina Wells?
Yes.
Okay. And what do you do at the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation?
I'm a special agent forensic scientist in the forensic biology unit and also a member of the violent crime response team.
Okay. So describe kind of your day-to-day work at TBI when you are in the lab.
When I'm in the lab, I screen evidence for bodily fluids and I perform DNA analysis on evidence.
And do you have some training and experience in that field to allow you to complete that work?
I do. I have my college background is a Bachelor of Science degree in chemistry, and I have a doctorate degree in biochemistry. And then I went through an extensive training at the TBI in the forensic biology unit that consisted of presentations, direct observation of other analysts, and competency test at the end to complete the training.
And Agent Proctor, have you been qualified in the state of Tennessee as an expert before?
I have.
In what field?
It was in serology and DNA analysis.
Your Honor, I would ask to make Ms. Proctor an expert in serology and DNA analysis.
All right, she was qualified as an expert in those fields.
Agent Proctor, I'm going to hand you a report from 4/25/18. Do you recognize that, ma'am?
I do.
I can get out of the way of the screen here so everybody can see. Did you do testing, let me ask you this first. Were you a member of the VRC team that went out to Garner's Creek Road?
I was.
And what was your role on the team?
I was the serologist on the team.
Okay. And were numerous items collected and tested by you as well as others as part of that?
Yes.
Right. And I believe you have a number of reports that you have made to record the findings of your testing. Is that correct?
Yes, I do.
All right. And this first report, what was the date that it was issued?
It was 4/25/18.
These reports, they can be kind of hard to read sometimes. So the exhibits, you see that column on the left there?
I do.
What is that referring to?
That is the item of evidence that would have come into the lab that then I did testing on or looked at.
And the numbers by it, the 001, 007, what does that refer to?
That is the TBI's, the lab's exhibit number that was assigned to that piece of evidence.
Now, when a piece of evidence comes into the TBI, how does it come in?
It's submitted to our evidence receiving unit and by the agency or agents, and then it is received by one of our evidence receiving technicians. It's given a unique identifier number and put a barcode on it, and then it's electronically tracked throughout the lab when it moves, and then stored in our vault in our evidence receiving unit until we would request that it be pulled for screening.
So it's securely held until you are ready to do your testing on that particular item?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm going to draw your attention to the results section. Is that kind of where you tell the results of what you found after your testing?
Yes.
All right. Under 001, what did you do to that item?
001 was a Chevrolet Impala, and I screened the vehicle for any presence of possible blood, and also did the inventory and collected items from that.
Okay. And did you, you said you took swabs for possible blood.
Yes,
What did you find, or did you do any further testing on those swabs?
I did.
And what did you do?
For this one, I tested them for the component of human blood, and then later I did DNA testing on them on a different report.
All right, so the report we're talking about now, you did testing for a component of blood. Is that
Yes.
accurate? All right, and was that testing positive on item 001?
On 001, the presumptive test indicated the presence of blood for the center console.
And that's of the red Chevrolet Impala that was tested.
Yes.
Okay. And then the next positive, I believe, was on 007A. What was that?
007A was a zip-up hoodie from Joseph Daniels.
Okay, and what was the test result from that?
Presumptive test indicated the presence of blood, and then testing for the presence of human hemoglobin, which is that component of human blood, was not performed due to a limited sample.
And then 007C, what is that?
Those were pants with strings that were in the front left pocket from Joseph Daniels.
Okay. And what was the result of that test?
Presumptive test on the pants 7C were indicated the presence of blood, and again, the testing for the presence of human hemoglobin was not performed due to a limited sample.
All right, and I want to draw your attention now to 009A. Is that the shoes from Joseph Daniels?
Yes.
And I believe it was also positive, the presumptive test.
Yes, both shoes.
Okay. So in summary, we have a presumptive test of positive for blood and or hemoglobin from the center console of the car, shoes, hoodie, and pants of Mr. Daniels.
Correct.
Okay. Your Honor, I'd ask to make that the next exhibit, please.
What is exhibit 208?
Can you identify that, Agent Wells, or excuse me, Agent Proctor? I apologize.
This is my report from 10/25/18.
And you spoke a minute ago that you did kind of a follow-up test after the test for hemoglobin and presumptive test for blood. Is that correct?
Yes.
And is that in this report?
Yeah, this report would have the DNA results from the previous results that we just talked about.
All right, so if I can refer you to 007A, which again is the zip-up hoodie from the defendant, Joseph Daniels. What was the result of your test for that?
For the DNA analysis, all the stains on the zip-up hoodie matched Joseph Daniels.
All right, let's talk about the stains, or let's get into that generally. How do you know, when you get a hoodie, how do you know what to test?
First, I would look just visually at, for this example, the hoodie, and determine, is there any reddish-brown staining on that hoodie that could possibly be blood?
And then further, what do you do after that?
And then I would do chemical testing to further determine if our presumptive tests are indicating that it could be blood. After I determined if they were positive, then if I had enough sample, I would go on and do another chemical test that would determine whether or not it was human blood. And then I would take a small cutting of that stain and proceed to DNA analysis to develop a DNA profile.
So the first part of that we talked about, that you just spoke of, the presumptive testing, that was
Yes.
the last report we talked about.
Correct.
So at this time, we're at the cutting a small sample and further testing on it.
Yes.
All right. So 007A, which is the zip-up hoodie from the defendant, you said matched Joseph Daniels' DNA.
Correct.
All right. And then 007C, which was the pants with strings from the defendant. What was the results from that?
Those for 7C, again, it matched Joseph Daniels.
All right. And 9A, the shoes.
The shoes, so for the left shoe, the DNA profile was a mixture of at least 3 individuals, and then the major mixture profile was consistent with a mixture of 2 individuals. And then I assumed Joseph Daniels was a contributor to that profile and then deduced out the remaining profile, and this was consistent with Alex Nolan.
So based on your testing, it's your opinion that the DNA of Joseph Daniels and Alex Nolan was on this left shoe?
Yes.
All right. And what about for the right shoe?
For the right shoe, this was a mixture of at least 2 individuals, and then the major contributor matched Joseph Daniels, and then further than that, then it was a limited minor contributor profile that I couldn't do anything further with. It was inconclusive.
Let's talk about a mixture. What does a mixture mean when you say that?
So a mixture is meaning that it didn't come from just one single person. That would be a single source, what we call it, a single source profile. But a mixture is DNA profiles that consist of more than one person.
And is it sometimes possible to unmix that or figure out who it is?
Yes,
And sometimes is that not able to be done?
correct.
Okay. All right. And then let me direct you to 014A, which was the swab, I believe, from the center console of the maroon Chevy.
Yes.
What was your result there?
The DNA profile matched Joseph Daniels.
All right. Let me hand you a photograph. You recognize that?
I do.
And what is that?
This is the staining from the center console that then I ended up swabbing.
All right. And would you show the jury where the stain was?
So the stain was right here in this area, and then that's my ruler that I had to kind of determine how approximate the size of it was.
And you were able to determine after testing that that stain was blood from Joseph Daniels?
Yes.
All right. Your Honor, estimate that picture of the next exhibit, please.
The 209.
And Agent Proctor, let me now direct your attention to 19A. That is I believe, a cobalt shovel from 1112 Garners Creek Road. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and you did testing on both the spade and the handle portion.
Yes.
And there was no presence of DNA on the spade?
Yes, they tested presumptive, I did presumptive testing, but then I was not able to develop a DNA profile off of that.
And what about for the handle of that shovel?
The handle, I did have a profile on the portion of the handle that I swabbed for touch DNA.
And who was that profile consistent with?
It was consistent with Joseph Daniels.
All right. And you have a note down here that there were possible hairs collected from the exhibit. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And how many hairs were there?
Your Honor, we have a sidebar.
So Agent Proctor, excuse me, I've referred to you as Agent Wells for too long now. Agent Proctor, so were there some hairs found on that shovel?
Yes,
And the TBI does not test hair, is that correct?
correct.
All right. So moving then to item 20A, which I believe was a wooden-handled shovel, is that right?
That's right.
You tested the handle portion of that shovel, and what was found on the handle portion?
The handle portion was a mixture of at least 3 individuals, and then I had a major contributor profile that was to an unknown male.
All right, so there were at least 3 individuals' DNA on there, and the major contributor was an unknown male.
Yes,
All right, and then just a quick note of, there was an envelope that was tested that I believe was submitted a little after this original stuff. Is that accurate?
correct,
And Mr. Daniels' DNA was found on that envelope.
correct.
All right. Your Honor, we'd ask to make that report the next exhibit.
Exhibit 210.
What have I handed you now, Agent Wills?
This is my report from 5/28/19.
And I will get it right in a minute, Agent Proctor. Maybe. I will do my best. All right, was there more testing done on that wooden-handled shovel that we spoke of just a second ago?
There was comparison done. yes.
Comparison. All right, tell us what the result of that was.
I had received a standard, a DNA standard from Joe Daniels, and then I compared it to the previous profile that I developed in the last report that we talked about. And this, the major contributor profile, was consistent with Joe Daniels.
All right, and when you say Joe Daniels, are you referring to, who are you referring to?
I believe that was the grandfather.
Okay. And Exhibit 38A, which is the comparison that you did, was from a buccal swab from Joe Daniels, is that correct?
Correct.
Your Honor, we would ask to make that the next exhibit.
Exhibit 2211.
And Agent Proctor, let me point out one more thing. There was at least 3 individuals. There was a mixture of at least 3 individuals. Is that accurate on that?
Yes.
And were you able to determine who the other 2 individuals were?
No.
Okay. Do you recognize what I've handed you?
Yes.
And what is that?
This is my report from 7/17/19.
All right, and I believe you were testing a candy wrapper and a boot that were found during some of the searches. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Okay. And were you able to find any DNA on either one of those?
No.
All right. Your Honor, I ask to make that the next exhibit, please.
212.
Do you recognize what I've handed you there, Agent Proctor?
I do.
And what is that?
This is my report from 7/24/20.
And what are you testing there?
This was a lock and key from 1112 Garners Creek Road.
All right, so that was collected from the residents of 112 Garners Creek.
Yes.
And were you able to find any DNA on the lock and key?
Yes.
Okay. And what was were you able to identify those individuals?
No.
All right, was there a mixture or was there a single individual?
It was a mixture of at least 2 individuals.
All right. And was one of those, I believe your report says there was at least 1 male.
Correct.
So we don't know who was on it, but there was at least one male's DNA on that.
Correct.
Could it have been more than one male? Do we know?
It's possible, yes.
Okay. Your Honor, I'd ask to make that the next exhibit, please.
214, no, but 213.
I'm on 210.
Trust me, I think it's 213.
Agent Proctor, do you recognize that bag that I've handed you?
I do.
Okay, and what is that?
This is the brown paper bag that was submitted to the lab, and then I opened up and tested for my exhibit 42A.
So that would be the lock and key that we just referred to.
Yes.
All right. Your Honor, I would ask to make that the next exhibit, please. Certainly, Your Honor.
There should be 214 on it.
Okay. Got it. I got it stuck.
According to the record, that is correct. Oh, it's back.
I don't care.
Agent Proctor, I will ask you just a couple questions while Ms. Pam is catching up here. Did you take some photos of items that were in the red Chevrolet Impala?
Yes.
All right, and were you and Ms. Littlejohn kind of working on that vehicle together or parts of that vehicle together?
We didn't directly, like, physically work on it together, but yes, I mean, we both worked on it.
Okay, so she was looking for the trace evidence, and what were you looking for?
I was, again, doing serology DNA, so screening for blood to begin with.
So when you get a vehicle and you're told, we want you to screen for blood in there, what do you do?
I'll do a visual examination, depending on what the interior looks like if it's a dark interior, I will, what we call, do general rubbings, which is basically where I take paper and go over the surfaces of, say, like the seats or the consoles or, you know, anything inside, and then test that with my chemicals to see if there could be possible blood. And then also just like examine the trunk area or basically the entire inside of the vehicle.
And we've already talked about, you did in fact find Mr. Daniel, the defendant's blood on the center console.
Yes.
And I'm going to hand you a photograph here. Did you take that photograph?
Yes.
And what is that depicting?
These are items from, well, specifically like the front passenger door, front passenger seat, floorboard, from the vehicle.
Agent Proctor, is that photograph that's on the screen the same as what you are holding?
Yes.
And these were items that were found inside the vehicle?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would ask to make that the next exhibit if we're ready for that.
Number 215.
I took him back in the microanalysis last night. He was asking for scissors. I took him back to the office.
Agent Proctor, what is that I've handed you?
This is another picture of some of the items that I took out and inventoried from that vehicle.
And is that picture that you're holding the same as what is on the screen?
It is.
All right, Your Honor, we'd ask to make that the next exhibit.
This would be number 216. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the reasons that I tell them to slow down is everything that's made an exhibit, our clerk has to mark it as an exhibit and make sure it's documented. So she and I are both trying to keep up with the exhibit numbers so that we don't mess it up. So if I tell the attorneys to slow down just a little bit, I know we're all anxious to keep moving, but I'm trying to make sure that we get this documented correctly, so. And plus, she throws things at me if I don't do that. Go ahead.
And Agent Proctor, do you recognize the photo that I've handed you there?
I do.
And what is it depicting?
It is more evidence or more items from the Impala and from the trunk is what you're mainly looking at.
And is that the same photo that we see on the screen?
It is.
Your Honor, I'd ask to make that the next exhibit.
It's going to be 217.
Agent Proctor, is that more items from the trunk
It is,
And is that the same picture that you're seeing up there on the screen?
yes.
And that bag, is that a taekwondo bag, do you recall?
Yes, it is.
All right, and we have some documents that we can see in that picture. Were there some documents in the trunk?
Yes.
All right, Your Honor, would ask to make that the next exhibit.
218.
Agent Proctor, that's kind of a zoomed-in picture, I believe, of the last picture on one of those documents. Was that document found in the trunk?
Yes.
And is that the same document we see on the screen here?
Yes.
All right, Your Honor, we'd ask to make that the next exhibit.
219.
One more, Agent Proctor. Was that another document that was found in the trunk of the vehicle?
Yes.
And was that the same as you see on the screen there?
Yes.
Your Honor, the next exhibit, please. And that's our questions, Your Honor.
And 220 on the last level there, 220.
I'm going to give them a second to get caught up. Agent Proctor, your job is to test items for blood.
Yes.
Can you explain the process when you swab something like the console? What do you do?
So after I take a picture of it with the ruler to document it, I will wet a swab with sterile water and then swab up that stain onto the swab, then package that, and then later whenever I'm ready to do DNA analysis on it, well, after I do the swab, then I'll test the filter paper. That's what I blot it onto, test it with my chemicals, see if it reacts. If I get a positive, then I will collect that stain, like I said, swabbing it up, and then later take a small piece of that swab and do DNA analysis on it.
Does the DNA analysis, is it only going to find DNA if there was blood? Or are there other types of DNA that could be there?
I mean, there are other types of DNA, yes.
So if someone was in that car and they had skin cells or something where you're swabbed at, would that come back?
Typically, if you have a staining of, that's presumptive positive for blood and looks like blood, that blood being there will, if you want to think, overpower skin cells, just due to the amount of blood that was there.
Once you've taken that sample, what is the process of determining what kind of DNA is in it? Do you put it in a centrifuge? Do you spin it down and break it up? And can you explain some of that?
Sure. So for the DNA process, once I take that cutting, we put it into chemicals that then break open the cells that are in that sample to get the DNA basically out of those cells. So then we can determine how much is there. We can make more, it's called amplifying or making more copies of it, so that we'll have enough of that DNA to then be able to put through our equipment to determine the DNA profile.
Is it possible in that process to break down some of the DNA and have it appear to be an unknown contributor or a minor contributor? When you get a mixed contributor,
Yes.
you see multiple people. Is it
Correct.
possible that comes from one person and it's broken down from the process?
You would not get a mixture from a single individual. Like if it was their DNA in that tube that was only from them and there was only one person, then no, I mean, our process wouldn't break it down into then developing a mixture profile, so to speak.
You wouldn't get an inconclusive profile? You wouldn't show a person and then another person that you couldn't tell anything about?
If it came from one single person, then, and that's all the DNA that was in that sample, then it would come from that one person. I mean, if there were other people in that sample, then potentially you could break open the cells and pick them up, so to speak. That's, in the profile, but then we would consider it a mixture because it would be more than one person.
Okay. And earlier you testified that you tested the handle of a shovel and found Mr. Daniels' DNA and the older Mr. Daniels DNA,
On two different shovels.
two different
yes.
shovels. And those were just shovels that they owned?
I believe they were in one of the sheds. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Other question?
Redirect.
Just briefly, Judge. Agent Proctor, do you have a copy of your report from July the 24th of 2020 that's already been made an exhibit?
Yes, I do.
I know Ms. Pam's working hard over there, so I'm going to try to get her to get that back out. What's on that, just so I can make sure we're all talking about the same thing?
The lock and key?
The test and the results of your testing on the lock and key?
Yes.
Now, was that touch DNA or was that blood, or what were you testing on that?
For the lock, I would have visually looked at it to see if there was any of that reddish-brown staining. And then when I didn't find any, then I would swab with the swabs and a little bit of that water to then collect any DNA that would have been. So it would have been more like something like touch DNA from like skin cells.
So the DNA that you found was not blood DNA, but more like touch DNA?
Correct.
From skin cells, you said?
I mean, it can be skin cells, sweat, I mean,
Okay.
anything like
Okay.
that.
And just let me make sure I didn't confuse everyone, because this is hard for me to understand too. A mixture of people.
Yes,
We are talking about more than one people whose DNA is on this item, is that correct?
yes,
Now, this mixture, and just using this report as an example, you say that the DNA profile obtained is consistent with a mixture of at least two individuals. Is that accurate?
correct,
So there's at least two people whose DNA is on this lock.
correct,
Now, we're not excluding anyone in this, are we?
correct,
But we're also can't say who that is.
correct,
I believe the only way that you said in this we can narrow it down is that there was at least one male.
correct,
So we know one male touched it and then an unknown other number of males or females.
correct.
All right, that's all, Your Honor.
Rick Ross?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. Agent, you may step down. We'll release you from your subpoena. State and declare your witness.
Charles Castellano.
I'm sorry, what was the last name?
Castlebono.
Afternoon, you'll step forward and raise your right hand.
Do you solemnly swear from testimony you give in this case be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Would you state your name for the jury, please, ma'am?
My name is Charlie, Charly, Castelbono, Castelbuono.
And Agent Castelbono, how are you employed?
I'm employed at the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation.
And what do you do there?
I'm a special agent forensic scientist in the forensic biology unit.
All right, so we have heard from one forensic biology unit person. What do you do in the forensic biology unit?
So same as the last analyst who testified, I process evidence looking for the presence of body fluids such as blood, semen, and saliva, and then take those items through the DNA testing process to generate DNA profiles, which can then be compared to DNA from known individuals.
And what is your education and experience background to allow you to do that?
I have a Bachelor of Science in Biology from Berry College. I also have a Master of Science in Forensic Science from the University of Central Florida. At the TBI, I received about a year of training, first observing a qualified analyst, performing analysis on evidence and DNA testing, then performing those tests myself under their supervision. I gave several oral presentations during that time. I also received a mock case and went through a mock trial, which I had to pass in order to start doing casework independently. Additionally, we have to have at least 8 hours of continuing education every year. I'm also certified by the American Board of Criminalistics in molecular biology.
And Agent Castelbono, have you testified in the courts of Tennessee as an expert before?
Yes, I have.
In what areas?
In what?
Area, was it serology and DNA analysis?
Yes.
All right, Your Honor, we would tender Agent Castelbono an expert in serology and DNA analysis.
Should be qualified as an expert in serology and microanalysis.
DNA analysis, Your Honor, yes, sir.
Let me try that again. DNA analysis, thank you.
Yes, sir. I'm going to hand you a report, Agent Castelbono. And, what was the date that report was issued?
February 6th of 2019.
I'm going to try to have it up on the screen so everybody can kind of follow along. I made a train wreck out of it last time, so I'll try to do better this time. What were you testing in this report?
There were several items. There was a pair of boots, an additional cowboy boot, a plaid shirt, a rain boot, a pair of boys' underwear, and a pacifier.
All right, and with these items, were you trying to find a DNA standard of the victim, Joe Clyde Daniels?
Yes, that was the purpose of testing these items.
And where did the comparison profile come from? Or was there one?
There was not one.
And that's what we were trying to obtain.
Correct.
And what was, looks like, judging from the results, everything that was tested came up a mixture of DNA and inconclusive.
That's correct.
Your Honor, we have to make that the next exhibit.
221.
And this next report is from February the 4th of 2019. Agent Castelbono, is that your complete report from February the 4th of 2019?
Yes, it is.
And what were we looking at, or what were you testing for in this report?
There were 2 pillows from the bedroom that I tested.
And those were exhibits 29A and 30A, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the comparison against which you were testing it was exhibit 10A. Was that DNA from the defendant, Joseph Daniels?
That's correct.
And what were your results as far as 29A?
So there were multiple stains that were tested. There were 2 stains on exhibit 29A. Both stains tested positive for the presence of blood. And for this first stain, it was a mixture of at least 2 individuals. The major contributor profile is consistent with exhibit 10A, Joseph Daniels. Due to the limited minor contributor profile obtained, interpretation of the minor contributor profile is deemed to be inconclusive. And for stain number 2, the DNA profile obtained from that matched exhibit 10A, Joseph Daniels.
All right, and let me ask you just well, this is from, I believe I said 2-4 earlier, it's from February 14th, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. What are you talking about a stain? When you tested a stain, what are you testing there?
So the 2 stains I tested, they tested positive for blood.
And is that just a stain you see on a visual inspection of the item?
Correct. So when I examine an item, if I'm looking for blood, I'll look for a reddish-brown stain that's characteristic of a dried blood stain.
So on that pillow, you found the defendant's blood?
Correct.
All right, and on 30A, was anything found on that?
Yes. 30A had multiple stained areas. There were 10 total that I tested. For stains 1, 2, and 3, presumptive chemical testing indicated the presence of blood. And for stain 6, presumptive chemical testing indicated the presence of blood. However, presumptive immunological testing did not indicate the presence of human hemoglobin, a component of human blood. And then for stains 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, and 10, presumptive chemical testing indicated the presence of blood. Presumptive immunological testing for the presence of human hemoglobin, a component of human blood, was not performed due to a limited sample. As far as the DNA results, for stain number 1, The DNA profile obtained is consistent with a mixture of at least 2 individuals. The major contributor profile matches Exhibit 10A, Joseph Daniels, and the limited minor contributor profile was inconclusive. For stains 2, 4, 6, 7, 9, and 10, the DNA profile obtained matched Exhibit 10A, Joseph Daniels. For stain number 3, the DNA profile obtained is consistent with Exhibit 10A, Joseph Daniels. And finally, stains 5 and 8, the DNA profile obtained was consistent with a mixture of at least 2 individuals, with the major contributor profile being consistent with Exhibit 10A, Joseph Daniels, and the limited minor contributor profile was inconclusive for that profile.
So out of all of that, if you kind of deduce it down a little bit, you tested 10 stains.
Yes,
And Mr. Daniels' DNA was found to be on all of those stains.
correct.
And then there were some mixtures where there were some other individuals' DNA in that as well.
Yes.
And the stains, many of those were blood stains from Mr. Daniels.
These all tested positive for the presence of blood, yes.
Your Honor, we'd ask to make that the next exhibit, please.
It'll be 222.
Agent Casabona, is this your report from February the 15th of 2019?
Yes, it is.
All right, we spoke a moment ago that you were trying to find a DNA standard of the victim, Joe Clyde Daniels. And now it appears that one was obtained. Is that correct?
So this was a sample, again, attempting to obtain a profile. Based on the nature of this sample, I can't 100% say that, yes, this came from Joe Clyde Daniels, but again, that was the purpose of the sample.
All right, and this was a DNA extract from Vanderbilt. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. And this DNA extract from Vanderbilt was compared to the wooden-handled shovel that is Exhibit 20A.
Yes.
All right, and tell us what your results found.
For the handle from the shovel, the DNA profile previously obtained was consistent with a mixture of at least 3 individuals. The major contributor profile is from an unknown male number 1. Therefore, exhibit number 37A, DNA extract from Vanderbilt Medical Center, can be excluded as the major contributor. And due to the limited minor contributor profile obtained, interpretation of the minor contributor profile is deemed to be inconclusive.
So this wooden-handled shovel, Exhibit 20A, had at least 3 people's DNA on it.
Yes,
And we know that this DNA extract from Vanderbilt was not the major contributor,
that's correct.
but we don't know whether or not it could have been the minor contributor.
Correct, because the minor contributor was inconclusive.
All right. We'd ask to make that the next exhibit, Your Honor.
223.
And last one, Agent Casabona. I believe this is a report from May the 27th of this year, not very long ago.
Yes.
And what were you testing in this report?
I swabbed an area inside of a Chevrolet Impala. Specifically, I swabbed the back of the front passenger seat and then performed DNA analysis on that swab.
And Ms. Lewis, can I have Exhibit 206, please?
What is it?
It's a picture.
Okay.
I apologize. I should have prepared you for that.
By the way, I know what
For that, I'll keep asking questions.
this one right here.
Yes, that is it. I'll hand you what's been marked Exhibit 206. Is that the area of the back seat of the red Impala that you were testing?
Yes, it is.
All right, and would you show that picture to the jury, please? And do you recall about where you were taking samples from, or swabs from?
I swabbed around this area, about whitish.
All right, thank you, Agent Casabona. And whose DNA was that found to be?
The partial DNA profile obtained is consistent with Exhibit 23A, Alex Nolan.
And is this the picture that we just showed to the jury?
Yes, it is.
So those, you said the white spots up there is what was swabbed for testing?
Yes, sort of the curved area towards the top of the seat.
So, you're talking about right here?
Like the curved stained area?
Oh, right.
Yeah,
That's the area that was swabbed for testing?
yes.
And that was determined to be the DNA of Alex Nolan?
Yes.
Your Honor, we'd ask to make that the next exhibit.
Would be 224.
We'd pass the witness.
Mitchell?
May I approach witness, Your Honor? Agent Castleton, do you recognize that image?
This appears to be the same pillow, my Exhibit 30A that I tested for blood.
Your Honor, I'd ask that be moved in as an exhibit, the next in line.
Can we
Not
see
able
the
to-
photo first, please?
You may.
This will be 225. This is the photograph of the pillow that was tested.
Yes, Your Honor. And I'd ask it be published to the jury. That photo is the pillow that had a bunch of stains on it that belonged to Mr. Daniels.
Yes.
Okay. In one of the forensic biology reports that you put together, you say that there was a sample extracted from Vanderbilt.
Yes.
You're not saying you know who that belongs to.
Correct. Because it was from a hospital, I don't know how it was generated. I don't obviously have chain of custody or, other than the name written on the side of the tube. It wasn't collected as evidence, so as far as where it was before it came into my possession, I can't
You can't
verify that.
But even with that, you compared that to the DNA found on the wooden-handled shovel, and it was excluded as a major contributor.
That's correct.
And you weren't able to determine that it was one of the minor contributors.
Correct. The minor contributors were inconclusive.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Read it right.
Just briefly, Judge. So the sample from Vanderbilt was taken when we were trying to find DNA from the victim, Joe Clyde Daniels.
Correct.
And was his name on the side of the tube?
It was.
Now, you can't verify that it was him specifically.
But that name was on the tube, yes.
Okay. And one more, or maybe a couple more questions about the DNA from the back seat that we referred to in the 52721 report. That was not blood DNA, or not blood on the seat?
Correct.
Are you able to tell what it was?
I'm not, other than it appeared to be a white, sort of crusty stain.
Okay. And I believe you testified earlier that you're looking for blood, saliva, that kind of thing?
Yes.
And saliva also contains DNA.
Yes.
So if someone were to sneeze from the back seat and get it all over the front seat, DNA is in that.
Yes.
All right. That's all, Your Honor.
Recross.
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, ma'am. You may step down and you're released from your subpoena. State, may I call your next witness?
State calls Miranda Gaddis.
Good afternoon. If you'll step it around here. Raise your right hand and face our clerk to be sworn in.
Do you solemnly swear affirm the testimony you give in this case be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Mr. Crowder?
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Hi,
Will you state your first and last name for the record, please?
Miranda Gaddis, Miranda, Gaddis, Gaddes.
You've done this before.
Yes, sir, I have.
And Agent Gaddis, you are currently employed for the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
What is your current position?
My current position is in the Criminal Investigation Division. However, prior to that, I was assigned to the Forensic Services Division, which is the crime laboratory, and I was a forensic scientist in the Microanalysis, or what's also known as the Trace Evidence Unit.
Thank you. And were you employed as a microanalysis in April of 2018?
Yes, sir, I was.
And were you also part of the VCRT unit that came to Dixon County and Garners Creek?
Yes, sir, I was.
And tell us some of the qualifications for becoming and working as a microanalysis, yours specifically.
I received a Bachelor of Science degree from Cumberland University in 2002. I then worked for an environmental laboratory for 4.5 years. I then came to TBI, at which time I underwent extensive training in the areas of paint analysis, fiber analysis, shoe and tire track comparisons, as well as physical comparisons. I have also attended and successfully completed training courses at the McCrone Research Institute in Chicago, Illinois, McCrone College of Microscopy in Westmont, Illinois, courses at the National Forensic Science Technology Center in Largo, Florida, as well as a course at the Federal Bureau of Investigation in Quantico, Virginia. During that time of being in the laboratory, I was also a member of the Tennessee Division of the International Association for Identification, as well as being a member of the American Society for Trace Evidence Examiners.
Thank you. And I would tender Agent Gaddis as an expert in microanalysis.
No objection, Your Honor.
You will be qualified as an expert in microanalysis.
Agent Gaddis, can you identify this report, please?
Yes, sir.
And what is it?
This is a copy of my official microanalysis report from May 31st of 2018, and it's a physical comparison examination that I did.
Thank you. And what is a physical comparison examination, just generally?
A physical comparison is just as the name implies, so it's looking at the physical characteristics of two items and then comparing those physical characteristics. And in some cases, if an item is broken, much like a jigsaw puzzle, then I'm going to look for those edges along that are the broken edges, and I will try to compare those and fit those back together.
Thank you. And it appears that Exhibit 026A is a piece of black fiberglass from a field off of McElhaney Road. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so was this piece of fiberglass collected in the field and then submitted for microanalysis and comparison?
Yes, sir, it was.
And what were you asked to compare this piece of black plastic to?
I was asked to compare this piece of plastic to two vehicles that were submitted to the laboratory.
And would those two vehicles be a red or maroon Chevrolet Impala and a silver Chevrolet Impala?
Yes, sir.
And do you know why you were asked to do that comparison?
Typically, when we're asked to do those, it's because one piece comes from one location and you're trying to tie a vehicle back to that location. In this case, with the plastic being found off of this road, I would imagine they were trying to place a vehicle back at this location.
Okay. And did you complete a comparison?
Yes, sir, I did.
What was the result?
It was inconsistent with the physical characteristics, and it also did not fracture match back to Exhibit 18, which is the silver Impala, and then the maroon Impala did not have any missing parts to compare it back to, and it was inconsistent with that vehicle also.
Okay. So from your kind of knowledge of the case and being on the VCR team, someone collected this piece of evidence which they thought could be from a broken component of the silver Impala or the red Impala?
Yes, sir.
But in fact, it was not.
That's correct.
All right. I'll move this exhibit, or this lab report as the next exhibit, please.
Will be 226.
If you would just hand that to the clerk. Thank you. And Agent Gaddis, you completed one additional microanalysis report, is that correct?
Yes, sir, I did.
And it is a report that was issued on February 12th of 2020.
That's correct.
And can you discuss what you did in this examination?
I was asked to compare fibers that had been removed from a shovel, and I was asked to compare those with clothing from Joseph Daniels, as well as fiber standards that were removed from the trunk of the Impala.
And we've already heard some testimony about how fibers and debris, dirt, hair are collected. In this case, were these type of items, fiber and debris, collected from different areas or different objects?
Can you rephrase
Yeah,
that?
sure. Let's start with Exhibit 013A, trunk fiber standards for Impala.
Yes, sir.
And so what does that mean, trunk fiber standards?
So it depends on what the trunk is like. Specifically with this one, there were two different standards collected. So typically in the trunk of a vehicle, the mat that's present, the fibers can be different than the fibers present on the side of the trunk. So fiber standards are taken from both of those locations.
Okay? And from those fibers from the trunk, what did you do?
So I typically look at those after I look at my question fibers. So I always deal with the question fibers first. In this case, it was the fibers from the shovel, because we're trying to find a location where those fibers came from. So we refer to those as question fibers. So I mount those fibers on a glass slide, and that's so that I can see them microscopically better and gather optical information from those fibers. Then after I've worked with my question fibers, I will deal with my known fibers, which in this case is from the trunk and the clothing from Joseph Daniels. And the reason I wait to do those is I make sure that there's no chance of contamination. So I will wait till the following day to analyze the known fibers, and I'll make sure I've changed my clothing, my lab coat, and everything in between. And then I will mount those fibers on a slide also. And then I will take those slides, my question and my known, and I will put them on a comparison microscope, which basically just has two different stages that I can put my question and known on. And I can look at those at the same time to do a comparison with the fibers from each of the locations.
Okay, so let's back up just a little bit and talk more specifically about an unknown fiber. In this case, were there some unknown fibers collected?
Yes, sir, there were.
And do you know how those fibers were collected or where they were collected from?
They were collected from a shovel. I don't know exactly how they were collected because they were collected prior to me processing them.
Okay. And can you identify this photograph?
Yes, sir.
What is that?
This is a picture, a microscopic photo that I took of the fibers that were present in the exhibit that contained the fibers from the shovel.
And is the photograph you're holding the same photograph that we see on the screen?
Yes, sir, it is.
So do we see the unknown fibers in this photograph?
Yes, sir. So it would be that entire bundle of fibers that are present on, kind of on the left side. And then it would also be those two fibers to the right side that are closer to the black line.
Okay, so big picture, what's all the yellow?
The yellow is a Post-it note that the fibers were collected on.
And we're looking through a microscope here?
Yes, sir.
And what are these things?
That is just a bundle of fibers that were stuck together and placed on the Post-it note.
And what were these fibers here collected from?
They were collected from the shovel.
From the shovel. Now, over here, what are these objects?
Those are a couple of other fibers that were present on there, so I removed those and mounted those as well.
Look, can you tell what color this fiber is?
It appears to be blue,
And this one?
appears to be red.
And what's this black mark?
So when I received it, it appeared as though whoever had processed that evidence before had marked on the Post-it where the fibers were, so that it wouldn't be confused with where they had placed the hair also.
I mean, it's kind of important to understand we're looking through this is a photograph through a microscope.
Yes, sir, it is.
Move that to the next exhibit, please.
227.
And can you identify this photograph?
Yes, sir. So this is a closer-up photo of that blue and red fiber on the right side that was close to the line.
Okay. Blue fiber, red fiber.
Yes, sir.
I'll move that as Exhibit 228. And one more photo. Can you identify that?
Yes, sir. So this is just a closer-up photo of just the debris, so the wad of fibers that were present on the left side of that first photograph.
Okay, so our unknown fibers are one's blue and one's red.
Yes, sir. And then there are some white tannish fibers, natural fibers that were located in this bundle.
All right, so your objective, once identifying these unknown fibers, is then to compare them to any other fibers that have been collected in this case at large.
Yes, sir.
All right, and I'll move that as the next exhibit, please.
You know, this one was, this one.
Yes, sir.
Close up of the bundle of fibers.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Is
That's
that-
229.
Thank you. All right, so you've got a group now of unknown fibers, and you're going to go through and see if any other fibers have been collected and submitted in this entire case.
Yes, sir.
And did you do that?
Yes, sir, I did.
All right, and so let's start at the top of your lab report and work down as to what you compared the blue, red, and white fibers to.
I compared it to the zip-up hoodie from Joseph Daniels, T-shirt from Joseph Daniels, pants with strings in front left pocket from Joseph Daniels, the boxers from Joseph Daniels, socks from Joseph Daniels, a T-shirt from the dryer at 1112 Garners Creek Road, the trunk fiber standards from the Impala, and I believe that's it.
Okay, and what were the results of your physical examination?
So my report reads, physical examination of Exhibit 20A revealed the presence of several red, white, and blue fibers. Physical and microscopic comparison of the white cotton fibers from Exhibit 20A-01 with the white cotton fibers in the construction of Exhibit 7A revealed them to be consistent with respect to color and appearance. Therefore, the white cotton fibers from the shovel could have come from the zip-up hoodie from Joseph Daniels or another source with these properties. And then we always put a statement that says, due to the frequent use of cotton in today's society, comparison of cotton fibers may have limited evidentiary value. And the reason for that is, if we pulled most of the people in this room, we probably mostly all have white cotton somewhere on our body. So it's a very common fiber, so we don't put a lot of emphasis on the value of that comparison. And then physical and microscopic comparison of the remaining fibers from Exhibit 20A-1 with the fibers in the construction of Exhibits 2A, 7A, 7B, 7C, 7D, 7E, and 13A did not reveal the presence of fibers to indicate a fiber transfer. So they did not come from those items.
Thank you. And let's talk again about how often a white cotton fiber is found in everyday population.
They are everywhere. Like I said, I would be surprised if we pulled everybody in here if we didn't find 90% of people have white cotton on them somewhere. And even if you're not directly wearing white cotton, you may have white cotton transfers on your clothing.
Okay. And what about white cotton, how common it is to red and blue?
The red and blue fibers in this case are actually synthetic fibers. So there are two main types of fibers, natural and synthetic. And that's why we do the microscopic exam, because there's information we can see about fibers to tell whether or not they're synthetic or natural. And so in this case, synthetic fibers are typically rarer than cotton fibers are, white cotton especially.
Okay. And Agent Gaddis, if you could, did I already give you the copy?
You did not.
Can you identify this guy?
Yes, sir.
And what is that?
This is an official copy of my microanalysis report from February 12th of 2020 of the fiber examination.
Thank you. And I will move that as Exhibit 230. And I'll pass the witness.
Mr. Mitchell?
Agent Gaddis, your first report that y'all discussed, you were sent a piece of fiberglass from a field in Dixon County, and you were able to determine that it didn't match the two vehicles you were asked to compare it to.
That is correct.
And then the next report that you discussed with General Crouch, you talked about some fibers, and the results of that were that the white cotton fibers matched one article you checked. But that is not very reliable evidence because almost every one that has any contact with cotton is going to have white cotton fibers.
Correct.
And the other two, the red and the blue, did not match any of the items.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
So effectively, those did not match anything that was sent to you from my client.
That's correct.
Thank you, Agent Gaddis. You are released from your subpoena. Crouch?
State calls John Dunn. Dunn, if you'll come forward, please. Step right up here, raise your right hand and face our clerk.
Do you solemnly swear affirm testimony you give in this case be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Would you state your full name, please?
John Dunn.
Thank you. If you want to go ahead and get your stuff out, that's fine too. I interrupted you. Thank you. And would you spell your first and last name?
JOHNDUNN.
Thank you. Agent Dunn, where are you employed?
I'm employed at the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation in their Nashville Crime Laboratory.
And what's your position there?
I'm a special agent forensic scientist assigned to the Latent Print Unit.
Okay. And how long have you been working in the Latent Print Unit?
Just about 6 years now.
So you were working there in April and May of 2018.
Yes, I was.
And what do you do in the Latent Print Unit? Tell us what a latent print is.
So what was the last part of that?
What is a latent print and what do you do in that unit?
So in that unit, I examine items of evidence for the presence of latent prints. I analyze those latent prints and compare them to known impressions. I prepare reports and I testify in courts of law as necessary. A latent print is basically a fingerprint that is very difficult to see because it is made of sweats and oils that are naturally occurring on your skin. So when you touch the surface of some object, you can leave behind an impression or a reproduction of a fingerprint that is on your fingers. And since these are left behind in something that is very difficult to see, oftentimes it takes some type of processing in order to actually visualize them and able to see them.
Okay. And what training and background do you have to specialize in latent print?
I have a Bachelor's of Science in Chemistry from Cedarville University. I also completed a 14-month training program at the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation in order to be able to do my job.
And have you previously been qualified as an expert in any courts in Tennessee in latent prints?
Yes, I have.
And at this time, I would offer Agent Dunn as an expert in latent print.
All right, you'll be qualified as an expert witness on latent prints.
Thank you. And Agent Dunn, I want to first address a latent print report that was issued on April 20th of 2018.
Okay.
And we're going to be discussing Exhibit 001, which is a Chevrolet Impala. And can you tell us, give us any more detail about the Impala and then what you did?
It was a maroon-colored Chevrolet Impala. I basically focused my examinations to the trunk area. I did a visual examination as well as a super glue fuming process that can help me to visualize and develop latent prints that might be there. I then did a dusting process that can also help to develop and visualize those latent prints that might be there. My results were that I did not find any latent prints that were of use for comparison.
Is that surprising?
It's not incredibly surprising. There's lots of different reasons why a latent print may or may not be found on a specific surface, including the texture of the surface, what the surface is made up of, as well as the conditions of someone's hand when they might have touched that surface.
Okay. Tell us about the, what did you call it, the super glue process in which you're trying to lift prints?
So the super glue process is a fuming process. We'll place super glue in a small dish and place that on a hot plate. And that hot plate will cause the super glue to fume. And the fumes actually attach to these sweats and oils that make up the fingerprint. It will make it so that that print is easier to see, and it'll develop areas of that print that you wouldn't have seen otherwise.
And you did that with this Impala?
Yes, I did.
And I know you've testified you did that to the trunk area. Any other areas of the vehicle?
No, sir.
Okay. And other than the super glue fuming test, how else do you look for latent prints?
I also look visually using just normal light. I'll use a flashlight or a light bar at various angles. And then I also, in this case, used a dusting process that was just another way to try and develop anything that I could possibly see.
Okay. And Agent Dunn, can you identify this?
Yes, this is, looks like it's a copy of my report.
Is that your signature on the second page?
Yes, sir.
And I will move that as the next exhibit.
It'll be 231.
Thank you. And if you would just hand that to the clerk. Agent Dunn, now let me refer you to a lab report that was issued on May 25th of 2018.
Yes, sir.
And as the exhibit, it's marked as 026A, which is a piece of black fiberglass from a field off McElhaney Road.
Yes, sir.
And what did you do there?
With this exhibit, I confined my processing
Hold
to...
up,
oh,
hold up
sorry.
1 second, your microphone went out. Let's try it again.
Yeah, am I back?
You're back.
With this exhibit, I confined my processing to just a visual examination. It was incredibly dirty, and so I just looked with extra light, with like a flashlight or a light bar, and again, I did not find any fingerprints on this.
Thank you. Agent, can you identify this, please?
Yes, this is a copy of my report.
And I'll have that moved as the next exhibit, 232. And I'll pass the witness.
Question?
With latent fingerprints, it's not unusual for you not to find anything.
Not unusual at all.
But you didn't find anything.
That's correct.
Nothing further.
Any further questions?
Thank you, sir. You may step down and you're released from your subpoena.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Raj?
Agent Kyle Osborne, Your Honor.
please raise your right hand and place our clerk to be placed in the row.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this case be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Would you state your name and spell your first and last name, please, sir?
Kyle Osborne, Kyleosborne.
And Agent Osborne, where are you employed?
I am employed at the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation Nashville Crime Laboratory.
And what do you do at the crime lab?
I'm a special agent forensic scientist assigned to the Microanalysis unit.
All right, and we've talked a little bit about microanalysis already, so I won't go into the details too much, but what kind of training and experience do you have to allow you to perform your duties?
I have a Bachelor's of Arts in Chemistry from Vanderbilt University, as well as a Master's in Science from the Georgia Institute of Technology. On top of that, after I was hired at the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, I underwent training courses in each discipline in which I do testing.
And have you testified as an expert in microanalysis before in Tennessee?
Yes, sir, I have.
Your Honor, I would tender Agent Osborne an expert in microanalysis.
Qualified as an expert in microanalysis.
So, Agent Osborne, I'm going to hand you a report. And do you recognize what I've handed you?
Yes, sir, I do.
And what is it?
This appears to be an accurate copy of my official microanalysis report issued May 10th, 2021.
All right, so, and what were you testing in this report?
So in this report, I was testing our laboratory exhibit 20A, the shovel from 1112 Garners Creek Road.
All right, and there were two shovels collected from Garners Creek Road. One was a cobalt shovel and the other had a wooden handle. Was this the wooden handle shovel that you were testing?
Yes, sir, it was.
All right. And there was a stain on the spade portion of the shovel. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. There was a stain on the head or spade of the shovel, as well as small amounts of staining near the joint where the handle meets the spade, and a small amount on the handle itself.
So, and you were tasked with trying to determine if that was bleach or what kind of stain that was. Is that correct?
That is correct. I was asked if that staining could potentially have been bleach.
All right, and what did you do to perform that test?
So to perform that testing, after I documented the packaging and the state of the shovel, I, using a scalpel, scraped small amounts from each of those stained areas into a petri dish, and those scraped samples of that white staining were then attempted to be dissolved in a small amount of purified water. At that point, after they had been taking some time to potentially dissolve, that water was tested to see if that solution was an acid or a base.
Okay, and what was the solution an acid or a base when you tested it?
The solution from each of those areas was neutral, so it was neither acidic nor basic.
So had the stain been bleach, what would you have expected to see?
Had that have been bleach that had redissolved, that solution should have been basic.
All right. Your Honor, I would move his report as the next exhibit and pass the witness.
233. Mr. Mitchell?
Your examination determined that there was a stain on the shovel, but it wasn't bleached.
That's correct. There was staining on the shovel, but it was not acidic or basic, so it was not bleach.
Could have been anything.
That's correct. I don't know what the staining was.
Nothing further.
Are you all right?
None, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. You may step down. Excuse from your subpoena.
Judge, may we have a sidebar?
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, I have some good news and some bad news. Actually, both of them are pretty good. This is our last witness for today, and the state has indicated they have a couple of witnesses for tomorrow, but they will finish their proof tomorrow. So it's looking like we're going to potentially finish this case within the next 2 to 3 days. So I know you were all wondering about how long it might be, but you will probably start your deliberations sometime around, I'm not holding you to it and not holding the lawyers to it, but hopefully you'll be able to start considering the evidence in this case later in the week or the weekend. So for that reason, you're going to have an early recess today. We're going to adjourn today and let you head on back to where you're staying and try to rest up so that tomorrow we can push through, and we'll just stop here. And we have a few witnesses from the state tomorrow, and then the defense may be calling some witnesses, or they may not. That's up to them. All right. We remind you not to discuss this case among yourselves at any point until such time as the case is concluded, and I've given you my final instructions. Thank you. We will stand adjourned until tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock.
All rise. This court is adjourned.
Recording stopped.
I was really done.
Yeah.
So that you make it from
Yeah, thank you. That's why you don't have
Got all this stuff locked in. Got all this stuff locked in.
my hand is hurt. See, I have lymphedema in this arm, and if I use it too much, it's starting to lock up, and that's what it was trying to do, and that's the reason why I told the judge I'm behind. Yeah, it was.